For those who may not be familiar with you, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your artwork and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Adam Trest. I am an artist. I am from and live in Laurel, Mississippi, which is a place that you might have heard about. There's a little TV show that happens here that's kind of fun. And I like to balance it with a lot of hard work and also that little TV show. A lot of people get to know about my artwork, and man, it's a wild experience that has happened over the last, I mean, really at this point, it's been like 10 years, which is crazy because it doesn't seem like it's been that long. But yeah, because of my work and the nature of my work, and then the exposure that we've gotten over the last specifically 5 years, I am very active in licensing, product design. I do a lot of fine artwork, but I also do a lot of reproductions, illustration, kind of full gambit of the art world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into kind of all those different paths you've taken. But first, can you take us back and just let me know what first sparked your interest in art? When did you know this is something you even wanted to pursue, whether, professionally or not? Just when did you
Sure.
kind of first have
No,
this?
I have been an artist since I could hold a crayon.
Mm.
Very like proudly, I think. I've two like I have had the most amazing parents who supported any decision I made, especially in the arts. And so like growing up, there's a funny story that like my mom, I was drawing in all my kids' books, right? Like with crayons. And my dad was like, "What is he doing? Why is he destroying that book?" And my mom was like, "Calm down. He's really like, he's not being destructive. He thinks he's making it better." Like
Mhm.
that's been basically like the theme of my life is like, I've wanted to create, I've wanted to go after the creative career. And so, really, as a really young kid, I loved to draw. And then my family is from Laurel, but my dad was in the oil field. So we lived all over the southeastern United States until I was 8. And when we moved back to Laurel when I was 8, that was sort of whenever like my art journey sort of really started. I had some amazing art teachers starting in the fourth grade that just poured into me, recognized my desire to be creative,
Mhm.
and really helped me pursue that in a way that was very productive, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and so lucky too. I think not everyone
Absolutely.
necessarily has that experience. Can you talk a little bit about that upbringing and being in the South and how has that influenced your creative path, your creative work?
Yeah. So, like come from a very blue collar family. And so we didn't have like original artwork just like hanging on the walls. Like if it was original works, it was mine
Uh-huh.
probably. And so I was very fortunate. I went to a small private school because my mom taught at the private school. And so I went to this school that is on our like the main street through our historic downtown here in Laurel. And we have one of the most beautiful art museums in Laurel, Mississippi that we don't deserve. Like, we shouldn't have this museum here in Laurel, but it is like there's a Malay, like there's a Rodin, we have a Chihuly chandelier, like all these
Wow.
beautiful pieces that I grew up just like playing around. Like, my art teacher would walk us across the street to the museum during our art class, and we like literally I have a vivid memory of like playing chase in the European gallery around a Rodin and just having no idea that that was a thing, like
Right.
that was supposed to be a special thing. It was, like a torso, like, and I was like, oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
tag it, it just wild. But again, it's a small town. Like, our town only has 17,000 people in it. And so because of that, like, it didn't feel precious until I grew up and realized that it was precious. And so, because of that, because I was around art and introduced to art at such a young age, it was in that same time period that in that same museum, I was introduced to the artist Walter Anderson, who a Mississippi artist, 30s and 40s, and his work super. pattern driven. I mean, like his work has inspired me the majority of my life. And so I was introduced to that in the fourth grade in that museum. And so it's just cool to watch and see, like, like that was such a cool and pivotal point of my life that then whenever in seventh grade, I went to a public school, and there I had Paula Pierce, this amazing art teacher who, again, recognized creativity, didn't try to stifle creativity, but just gave me room to create and gave me projects to work on that like really enhanced that. And again, introduced me to Walter Anderson from a different perspective. High school, same thing, same a professor that taught me the way that a college professor would. Like I always joked whenever I went to college, like I had already had drawing one, drawing two, you know,
Hmm.
all the basics. It just wasn't called that. My Miss Harrison had taught us those things already. And so I walked in with this great foundation so that whenever I went into design school later, it was like I was ready. And that, I mean, gave me a great foundation and a launch pad to jump into this crazy career that I'm in.
Yeah, well, so you decided you went to school, did you go to school specifically for art, for design? Like, did you have a path that you picked and like
Well,
what was that thought process?
as a, 16, 17-year-old, I decided art was great, but money was better. And so I was going to be an architect. Yeah,
Mhm.
I was going to go into this world and I was going to design. Like, I mean, really, if we look back at it, we're like, okay, I became an architect student because I really loved The Sims. I don't know if you know
Yes, yes.
like, I spent a lot of, I'm glad now there's like a little clock on the bottom that like tells you how many hours you've played the game. I'm really glad that that was not a part of like the old games because it would be embarrassing to look back at. But I really thought that I was going to be an architect. I love to design spaces for computer people. So why wouldn't I like to design spaces for real people? And I did. I stayed in architecture school for almost 4 years before I changed my major, taking art classes as electives along the way. But I went and did an internship in West Palm Beach, an amazing architect. I was given this amazing opportunity to actually design while I was in there. I wasn't just getting people coffee and, doing red line drawings. I was doing real design work. And at the end of that summer, I realized I had been miserable. I was half a mile from the beach and never went like the whole
Yeah.
summer. I like just a lot of really big red flags that summer that was like, I don't have work-life balance and have never had work-life balance. And so I was working way more than I should have, focusing on the job and not enjoying the place that I was, and realized that that job was always going to be that for me. And so I came back home and changed my major and became an art student and promised the architecture's program at my school, Mississippi State, was 5.5 or 5 years long. I promised my parents I would not stay longer than 5 years. And I did have to stay one semester extra. I was 5.5 years, but finished an entire 4 year curriculum in like 2 years, I think. So like
Impressive.
not bad.
Yeah, you made it work. Well, this is such great context. You talked a lot about Walter Anderson and all of these different, from all these different inspirations throughout your years, from a young age to college and I'm sure beyond. Can you, in your own words, describe your artistic style? Because I think when you said that name, I was like, I can see how this tracks, but I'd love to hear from you. What is your style? How has it evolved over the years and kind of, how is it still evolving, I guess?
Yeah, and still evolving. I think that's the important part. Like, so my career has taken a very wild roller coaster
Mhm.
journey. When I finished at Mississippi State in 2009, I left school as a, this is just wild, a classically trained portrait painter. I
Wow.
did like the seated oil portraits, the like I did love to do watercolor. I loved watercolor as a medium. And so I did a lot of like watercolor portraits because of my architecture background. I did a lot of house portraits. The work I do now was not the work I was doing sadly like 15 years ago. Just wild.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like 15 years, but that was not the work I was doing. I made a goal for myself that I was always going to be in the art world in some way, shape, or form from the moment I graduated until I found what it was that I wanted to do. So my journey went through private school education because I couldn't teach in the public school because I didn't have a education degree. So
Mhm.
I taught at every private school in like 3 counties. Like if they would have me, I would teach for them. And that was sort of like my stable income. But then as like I continued to work, I realized like I was doing a lot of portraits, and I know that there are a lot of very successful portrait painters out there. But like for me, it got to the point where I realized like I'm only ever going to sell a portrait one time, right?
Right.
Like if I paint this person's kids, I may get a twofer out of it if the grandparents want to print, right? But like most likely, I'm just selling this painting one time. And so in about 2013, 14, somewhere in there, I was approached by a local businessman who I did a map of their farm in watercolor. Very architectural, but also pattern driven, stylized. Pine trees were triangles, but there were so many of them that it like became this beautiful pattern. And I did that painting for him. His wife gave it to him as a present. And when I gave that painting to him, he met with, like, he asked me to come to his office and meet with him. And we sat down and we were like, he was like, here's the deal. You're doing great work. And I love the business side of things that I don't know about. So art is a cool place to start with that. But he was like, I want you to think about like, what would you do if you did a painting, but you could sell it infinite number of times? And I don't know that I'd ever really thought about that before. And so that started like my journey of portraits are really wonderful and I liked doing them, but I wanted to see like more of a commercial side of my work. And
Mhm.
then that started this whole tangent of like, I did these whole series of like maps that I thought that I really loved doing, but man, they took forever. And I loved the work, but then it was like by the time I finished them, maybe like the map was outdated already. And you're like, this sucks. And so you're doing all this work, but like, like we started wholesaling them. And like, I guess at that point, I started a wholesale company where I was selling the work, but like 24 by 24 prints don't do great in gift shops. Like you had
Yeah.
to figure out the marketing of it. And then that opened up the door to like, I met a guy at a trade show that's like, hey, I can put that on a pillow. And I was like, let's do it. Like a
Yeah.
pillow fits on a couch, a print doesn't do that. And so it was this whole journey into product development and marketing. And so through that, my wife and I opened a store. I produced like 80% of the products that were in the store.
Wow.
And we used as many manufacturers that we could domestically. And that was about the time that print on demand really started picking up. And the quality of print on demand started becoming something that was acceptable, like to retail. And so we started doing that. We started doing print on demand. We started finding manufacturers that also worked for these print on demand companies and using them so that we could kind of cut out the middleman whenever we needed a 100-piece order or whatever that would look like. And before that was over with, it was 2019. I had fully invested in a wholesale company that did baby stuff. It was like crib sheets, blankets, bibs, wall art. If you could use it in a nursery as decor, like that's what we were making. Had like 6 different lines, different like pattern lines. And we had gone to Atlanta Market and done temporaries. I mean, like we had gone like full tilt. My wife is a boss. There's not another way to say that actually. Like I'm like the dreamer and the creative, and she's like the one, oh, you said you want a wholesale company? Okay, let's do this. Like here's our actionable list. Let's check all these things off and then let's go to market. Like that's Lily. And so without her help, I mean, like I'd still be painting portraits probably, but she made sure that like if I had a thought or a dream about my work, she was going to be the actionable force behind it that helped me get to the finish line with that. And so, I mean, by the 2019, like we were, we had the company, we had the store, and man, we were spent. I mean, we were exhausted. the store was doing well, but not like well enough that we were content.
Hmm.
And so we had both been in education, and I was so burnt out that I was like, I'm going back to school. Like, I literally went back and got in Mississippi, it's called an alternate route. And it's where you go back and take summer classes, and you can get like basically an emergency certification to be a licensed teacher. And the only job that I could get was not as an art teacher, but as a gifted studies teacher. And so that August of 2019, I had gone back to school over the summer, started a job as a gifted teacher at our public school that was a magnet school. So again, I still followed my rule. Everything that happened in that school was arts centered, like arts based.
Yeah.
And so I just was a gifted teacher. So I got to challenge kids using art, which was such a cool concept. And I
Hmm.
really did love the job. But and just we honestly it was the Lord's provision. Like 2019, December of 2019, Lily and I were like, this is not working. And we closed our store on December 31st of 2019.
That timing.
I mean, it was like we went into 2020 having no idea what was coming, but I
Right.
had a stable job with a paycheck and insurance. And Lily had also a stable job that she was salaried at. And we had closed the store, we had closed the wholesale company. I was really not painting because I was teaching. I just
Mhm.
like, I was tired and had burnt myself out from designing collections, 3 months before every holiday, trying to get product in. And like, it was just a kind of a nightmare. And it was just not going to work out for us that way. And so 2020 happened, and here we are in this new life that we've never lived before of like
Right.
we come home at 4 o'clock and it's like, hey, we don't have anything to do. And it was this sort of beautiful thing that happened. And then spring break came around, and my like nobody knew what was happening, right? Like we left to leave for spring break, and I asked my principal, I was like, what do you COVID? What is this thing? Like, what are they saying? And she was like, she gets all the secret meetings at central office, and our
Right.
school is very small. So like we could talk to our principal in a way that was a little bit more than like, I don't know, we could ask those kind of questions. And
Right.
she was like, I honestly think we'll be out for 2 weeks and then we'll all be back.
Yeah. I mean, I remember those conversations so specifically too. I was like, oh, this is nothing. Like, we'll just stay home for a week. It's gonna be fine.
Oh, yeah.
And then that took a turn.
So we got home 2 weeks later. I never went back into a classroom, Haley. That was March. And I then like kind of sat down, and we lived in this awesome house that we like got for a steal that like it was way bigger than anything that we ever had like needed or wanted. And the whole time we lived there, we had not been there very long. We were like, what is like, why are we in this house? Like, this is like, this was too much. Like, we shouldn't have done this. And then, like,
Uh-huh.
by the end of COVID, we were like, we can add on, we
Uh-huh.
need more space. But we're in this beautiful house. It had this unbelievable studio that I wasn't really using because I had stopped painting.
Mhm.
And I went up to my studio during that break, and the girls were starting to figure out like what does online learning look like for my oldest at the time was a first grader. And so we were just like, we got to figure this out. But I was like, I am been given like a pretty cool opportunity here. I have April, May, June, July. I had 4 months before I really absolutely had to tell the school district something, whether I was coming back or not. And I was like, look, I have a beautiful studio. I have nothing but time on my hands. I have a paycheck and I have insurance until I tell them otherwise. I was like, I think I just want to try again. But I like made some major ground rules about how I was going to practice. And it really boiled down to that, like, I only wanted to paint what made me happy. I didn't want to paint what I thought other people wanted me to paint. And I wasn't going to take commissions. If I could make it work with those like three
Mhm.
kind of rules, then that was going to, like, I was like, I can do this. And so I started going back into sketchbooks, and I was like, anything from at that point, 2019 to 2010, those were all like work. Like everything I had done, there was just not, there was, might have been a few things that were like, I enjoyed that. But like for the most part, it was like, I was trying to provide for our family, like
Right,
I
right,
was trying to make sure our lights stayed on. So this was not really fun. This was just survival.
right.
Anything pre 2010, I graduated in December of 29 from Mississippi State. So 2024 to 2029, I looked through it and it was like everything was just like the grade, the project to do for school, right? And it was like not that I didn't enjoy those things, but none of them were just like creative joy, right?
Hmm.
And so luckily I'm a hoarder. And so like then there was like the high school books. And it was like, really ninth through 12th grade, really, I guess 10th through 12th grade. A lot of that was like finding who I was with the new technical skills that I was learning.
Hmm.
And then it was the work that was trying to get me into school, right? And
Right.
so it was like, it was not fun, but it just wasn't that like joy. And then I found like middle school, and it
Hmm.
was like, this kid didn't have to do any of this, right? Like
Right.
this kid could have been playing soccer or video games, or I could have been doing anything in the whole world. And I found sketchbooks that had drawings in them. And I was like, this is what I love. And it was me trying to, at that time, replicate Walter Anderson's style.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, that was when I really loved to draw. Like I loved expressing myself. Walter Anderson drew, it's called the seven motifs. And it's basically this pattern of like half circles, spirals, lines, zigzag lines. Like there's seven of these motifs that he uses repetitively throughout his work.
Hmm.
And I'd been taught those. And so I was using those motifs and figuring out how do you draw a bird with these seven motifs. Well, it's like Legos basically.
Yeah.
And so I went back to that and I was like, I want to take the joy and the fun that I had from that and then put this 15, 20 years worth of technical skills now that I've learned. And then I want to play with that. And that's where the style that I'm currently painting in was sort of developed from it. And it was wild. I mean, I started painting like that in probably April by the time I made that discovery.
Right.
And then by July, I was full time in my studio.
I think there's such an important lesson in that. I think for people who are listening and they're like, okay, great, but I don't have my style like you already do. It's like, I think the style is often in you, and it's when you either go back far enough to see when you were just playing or you allow yourself now to just play. It's you have to cancel out the outside noise of what does everyone else tell me or want me to do, or what do I think other people want me to do, and you just have to go do it, like do things for yourself. Or like every time I go to my parents' house, they have this closet in the basement that's like all my art from forever that I'm sure they're gonna make me take one day. But I just love flipping through it. Everything
Huh?
from, I studied art in school and college, high school, same as you. I had like an incredible art teacher, but even all the way back to like elementary school, like my book reports were so detailed. And the fact that we still have that, I'm like, I just love looking at like the way I carried a crayon. Like things like that are so interesting. But I think it's that reflection that often can really help you develop, the voice that you've had in you all along.
Did you have to do bubble maps in high school? Do you remember those?
Oh, what's
Like
a bubble map?
organizational tools where it's like there's a bubble in the middle and that's like the subject, and then you put all the facts around it in these.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Okay. There's like double bubble map. Like there's like all these maps.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
my seventh grade social studies teacher like made us do these bubble maps. And the thought of just drawing circles was just the worst to me. And in that search, I found like thinking maps that my seventh grade social studies teacher made me do that were like, I wish I could remember what they were, but it was like life as oh, that's what it was. It was life as a, what's it called? The people groups that don't have a place that they stay consistently. they like travel around the desert, right? Nomadic
No,
people.
nomadic.
And so
Yeah.
it was like all of the facts about nomadic people of the desert. And like I went full tilt. Like it was the most illustrated, like I could probably license it today. Like but I agree. I had not thought about that, that like it wasn't just that that style was a part of the artwork that I was doing. It was bleeding over into other parts of my life. And that's
Hmm.
when I knew that it was probably something special that I needed to lean into and like figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like for you, it's coming through as like certain shapes and certain like pattern building. But I think for other people, it's like, do you see certain like textures or like colors? Like there's, or even themes. Like I just feel like there's certain things that I've followed my whole life, and it's not until you look back to your childhood and like those early projects that you were doing that you start to notice it and you're like, ah, I see that. I see how that's carried through. It's just so interesting to me.
Yeah. And it's wild now because it's funny, like actually your podcast brought this conversation up. But my friend Kimberly Zuckley, who's been on here before,
Hmm.
we had this conversation about like how style becomes like bigger than the medium.
Hmm.
And I love like, man, that conversation changed so much about the way I thought about how I paint. Like my style now, if I draw something on my iPad or if I paint it on a canvas, my style still transcends that, right? You
Hmm.
can look at the digital art that I do and go, I think Adam Trest did that. Or you can look at an oil, like not an oil painting, because I don't have the patience for that, an acrylic painting that I did on a canvas and
Yeah.
go, hey, Adam Trest did that, right? Or a drawing, or like with licensing, that gets wild because like the process of making a cement tile is insane.
Hmm.
But my style transcends that process. And you can look at my line of tile and go, that looks like Adam Trest's work. Like, and that is so cool to me because once you figure out what it is, what are the motifs or the colors or whatever that is that you find that you love about your style and your work, like then get the opportunity to like lay that out and let it become all of these other beautiful things. And I think
Hmm.
that has been like the biggest part of my journey over the last, I don't know, 5 years or so.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. And I think I love that you're friends with Kimberly. I feel like her podcast with me in particular, I think it was like a year or so now that
Yes.
we recorded
Mhm.
it, but we talked about that she doesn't even really like the word style. She's like, it's you
Yeah.
just you form like a technique, but I think it's even more than that. But
Yes.
she's such a prime example, and you are as well, of like she can do like a little sketch or she can do a full-blown huge painting and you know it's her. Both she kind of has like a sense of like humor in her work, so you can kind
Exactly.
of catch in on that, but it's also just like the way she uses color and her layering. It's like people need to go look. Like you'll notice, you'll see it when you see it.
Yeah.
But I think the same with you, and that I think it takes finding that or like the pieces of that to be successful when you start to expand out. Because I think you've gone into so many product lines, but I don't think you did it too early where it was like, oh, I'm just doing all these random things and my voice isn't coming through. I
Sure.
think you established the style or like yourself as an artist, however you want to think about it first, so that when you expand it out, it makes sense and people could draw that line back to you. But I kind of want to hear in your own words how this is me projecting. Like, how did you actually expand? Like, did you start with artwork and then you're like, I'm gonna ready to do these other opportunities, or like, how did you think about all that?
So that's, I mean, again, so like it goes all the way back to when we had our first store, when I was producing all of that product.
Mm-hmm.
The product that we produced in like 2016 to 2019 was good product. Like it was really fun and should have probably been licensed. But because of where I was in my career, I personally just could not find the people to license the work, right? And that's part of like that's hard. That's difficult to get there. So because of who my wife is and because of how like again, she's a boss. Like when I would say I really want to make throw pillows, right? Like fabric and throw pillows was one of our big things that we did at our store.
Mm-hmm.
She would get on the phone and I'll never forget like she was on the phone with a mill. owner in Pennsylvania telling him what we were trying to do. This man owned a mill that wove fabric. And she was like, I want my husband's artwork on fabric. And he was like, that's not what we do. Like, we make the fabric. And she just like, not broke down, but just was just like, oh, like I don't, your industry is so frustrating. And he was like an older gentleman on his way out, like he's ready to retire. He didn't want to take anybody under his wing, but he was like,
Yeah.
tell me exactly what it is you're trying to do. And so she like goes through the process. Like, he is a designer, he's an artist. His work is very pattern driven. We'd love to see those patterns on fabric. And so he tells her, I don't even remember what it was, but all I remember was she showed me the website that like showed her all of the people that would do the things that we needed them to do in North Carolina. Now that's very far from us, but that's where it was happening.
Uh-huh.
And it was like an Excel spreadsheet that popped up on a web page. It was the most like, you can't hide information. Like the CIA could not have found that database. Like it was so rudimentary and like not, well, you know, like we're artists, like we want the beautiful and like the, like when I
Uh-huh.
click on the link, I want the page to flip, you know, like I want it to look and be beautiful. And it was literally like an Excel sheet with maybe even like the old school, like 1980s font that looked like the, you
Like
know what I'm
typewriter
talking
looking
about? Like
font.
whatever you printed off that page had to be printed on the paper with the little holes on the side of it. It was so just like, it blew my mind that that was like, that was their database, but it was. And we just started going down that list. And we finally did find a company who had that High Point group. They all worked together. And
Hmm.
so, because I couldn't find a licensing person, we had to find the company that made the fabric that was made to the specific specifications of the printer who printed dye sublimation, who could then use the fabric that we found to mill. The dye sublimation people, they were not a sewing room. So then we had to find a sewing room that would make the products that we wanted out of the fabrics that we had. It was wild. And we're
Right.
literally starting from like, we need it to be like 70% polyester. So like we learned so much about the actual production of the product that like putting the art on it at the end just seemed like almost silly, right? Like, but we were doing it, like we made the
Right.
product. And I think because we did that, I love that we now have the knowledge to know, A, don't do that. It will burn you out. You will be exhausted. But also B, like we can speak like in an educated way about how we want products made. And so like double-edged sword, like I know enough to be extremely dangerous when it comes to licensing opportunities now, but also I also know I don't ever want to do that again. And so that whole process taught me how my artwork needed to change and be in order to be put on these products that we were going to that extreme
Hmm.
to figure out how to produce. And so now my work again is, it just leans very well to licensing, and it leans very well to product development because there's a lot of flatness to it. It's easy to color separate if that's the process that's needed. It prints beautifully if you don't, like with gradients and, you know, able to have colors that are not solids, like they still do well on product. And so because of all of that, we've just been able to open more doors into licensing. Yeah.
Yeah, that
I don't
makes
remember your
sense.
original question. I just feel like I went on a long
No,
tangent.
that was really
I hadn't thought about that in a
helpful.
really long time, and it sparked some things for me. Sorry.
No, I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of people, or at least I've talked to a lot of artists that are interested in exploring, licensing or products or things that seem more passive. But I think you have to know that like it takes a lot to make something passive-ish. I'm always like, yeah, it could be, somewhat passive later on, but there's a lot of work that goes to that to get that gets you to that point.
And
And you
like,
want to make sure you're not devaluing the brand with like a bad product. And so you really were
exactly.
doing that too. Or,
Well, and
or
like
making
people
sure you
ask
weren't
me
doing
all the
that.
time, they're like, well, you sell a lot of prints because we do. We sell a lot of prints. And they're like, well, why don't you have the printer? Why are you not making the prints yourself? And I'm like, because I don't want to maintain a printer. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to calibrate a printer and make sure the colors, like, that's not how I want to spend time out of my day. I want to let a printer do that.
Mhm.
Because, and again, there are people that print their own prints, and that's awesome. But for me, it was that I don't want to be a printer. I
Right.
want to let somebody else be a printer. So we use a great printer out of Birmingham and another printer out of Jackson. And we've used a printer that was in Florida. Like, we try to keep them very local so that we can have conversations with the printer if there's ever an issue. Like, there are ways that we love to do that where the things that we still keep in house that we don't license, we're able to do those things, A, economically, B, product. Like, we want to control the quality of the product. And so, yeah, absolutely. We've learned there are some things that we really love to do, and there are some things that I don't want to do. And I want to let other people do them. So I have to make sure that my margins allow for that.
Right. And that's so important too, because I think as you grow, you have to know what your most valuable time is spent doing. And as the artist yourself, it's often on like the creation process and like being creatively inspired. And it could be so easy for you to be making so much money for prints. But if you're spending all day like filing paper in and out of a printer, there's a burnout rate on that, but there's also a at what point are we not having any new art coming out, no new print, no new SKUs stock because you're spending all your time on this like grunt work that maybe is best passed to a professional. I
Or
mean,
then you
there's
have to
a lot of
hire
examples of
someone
that.
to run the printer, or like there just becomes a pivot point where you go, a printer is going to have a printer that I can't afford,
Hmm.
and it's going to create a better product, and they're going to produce in a way that is just a higher quality than I can get out of my studio. And so it's either that I'm going to have to invest a lot in this product and then also still have to maintain it, or I can just give away a little bit of my profits to have someone else do it potentially, or maybe not, and let just get a better product. And I think like one of the things that you said just a second ago that I love is like there's a lot of artists out there that are wanting to develop product and they're wanting to go into licensing. And I'm still very like I do license products, but like my catalog is not huge. Like I think we have 4 licensing collaborations right now. And like that's compared to other people, like that's not a lot.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm trying to do things very slowly and build a very like intentional relationships with these licensing partnerships.
Right.
But that's where you can also take such great advantage of print on demand. Not all print on demand sites are created equal, and you have to do the research and find the samples and get the things done. But like there are products on my website that we still use print on demand because we like the quality of the product that they do. And we don't have to deal with inventory. We don't have to deal with shipping. We don't have to deal with all the headache of producing those products ourselves. But I still get to produce these great products that then get to go to my customer. And
Right.
it's just the understanding that print on demand is going to come at a premium. So in some ways, you may not get full wholesale cost out of a product. But I also know that I'm also not having to rent space to hold inventory, hire people to ship, hire people to package, pray that the product gets there safely. Like
Hmm.
that's all on the company, right? So it's an interesting thing. And we're in a really cool time where there are a lot of companies where you can do really great things for very little upfront because most print on demand companies are not even going to charge you like a subscription fee.
Yeah.
They're just going to let you have a digital product on your website. And if it sells, great, they'll produce it for you. If it doesn't, it's no skin off their back. It's just a file on their server. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of really cool opportunities if you're like, oh, I don't need to listen to this because I'm not ready to license yet, or like, I'm not at that place in my career. I mean, you can do some really cool things for very little through those types of companies. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think those are a really good way to like dip your toe in the water and also see if your work translates to those kind of things too.
absolutely.
Because there's a lot of artists, like myself included, some of my work I feel like isn't going to do as well on a like as prints, and I'm okay with that. I'm not trying like it's like you also want to learn what your customers want, why they want it. I mean, and this is an obvious one, but like when you were doing portraits, like there's nothing nothing else with that. Like we can't do anything with that. But I even just think like stylistically, like styles change and like what people are interested in buying, something as a print or as a, some form of product. Like there are certain artists that fall into that category more easily. And so I love print on demand being more accessible because you can kind of test it and be like, do I have the audience for this before I invest in like, if you do go to a printer and you have to buy like a certain amount of stock, like that can get expensive if you have to, if you have minimums and things like that. So I do
Well,
think
and
it's a
what you'll
great
find is
time.
that with a lot of printers, you're not going to have minimums, but in order to make it work financially with your margins, you do have to have like it's a quantity thing.
Right.
Like there's a crazy point in a lot of these printers where like the cost to have 100 printed versus 1,000 is like $20. Like, or in that's an extreme case, but
I feel like
like
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
it's like to print 1,000 for them is no more like that doesn't really so like the cost per print goes down for
Right.
like those crazy maps that we started producing in like 2013, 2014. We printed like in order to make the numbers work, I had like 700 or 800, I don't remember. It was a lot of them printed. I still have some, like there's still some
Yeah.
maps of them in storage where I'm like, I don't, these maps are, 10 years old. They're not like, that's not even, doesn't even look like that anymore, like, so it
Right.
is interesting. Like, you have to think about like when you do those printings, are you gonna, like, is it gonna stay relevant long enough for you to get through the stock that you have for sure?
Right. Well, kind of thinking about working through stock and sales and products, how have you been thinking about your marketing strategies and like platforms you use? Like what has really worked and maybe what hasn't worked for y'all? And I say
Well,
y'all now because I know Lily is the backbone of this business.
well, and it's really interesting too. So, okay. So Lily helped me build my career for sure.
Mhm.
No questions asked. But 3 years ago, I think it's been three time, it just runs away with me now. But Lily had an opportunity to become a partner in the gallery that represents me and Kimberly. Exactly. We talk about her a lot.
Mhm.
And so Lily actually is doing the things that she did for me with 48 Mississippi artists through the Karen
Amazing.
Gallery that she works for. And so Lily actually is taking a backseat in my business because she's letting me like the machine run at this point. And then her goal is now to help those other artists. And in doing so though, but yes, us, because now like it gets to the point and like I don't ever want to be a big business. I love the idea of tiny business and like
Mhm.
small business is a thing, but like there's a book about tiny business and I think it's really good about like just doing the core things that you were set out to do, but doing them well. And like it's things like Patagonia is still a tiny business, as
Yeah.
big of a business as it is. They still keep their sites very, within a margin, I guess.
Right.
And so in doing that, like I do have a team now. I have an amazing assistant who like helps me with my everything. Like I tell her all the time, I'm like, if you leave me, I'm like, I'm done. I just am gonna quit. I'm not even gonna try. But it's she, she's making sure that like the things that I don't love to do, like scheduling, and like she's great about answering emails, and when I am not good at that, and just finding the team members that help you do the things that you're not great at, I think is really important. And then I do have someone who helps me with my marketing, like helping me with emails and social media and things like that. Because as much as I love to do that, that is not something that I don't love to do, but it's something that sucks the time away from me.
Yeah.
I enjoy it maybe too much. And so then again, at some point, you stop producing. And if you stop producing, then what are you marketing? Like, so it's that finding that cycle. But all that to say, like with marketing, my favorite marketing tool that I have is not social media at all, but my email.
Mhm.
I never in a million years would have thought that I would say that, but I lost my Instagram account about, I don't even know, it was during COVID. My ad account got hacked and I still don't have it back. And so like there are things that my social media can't do. Like I can't purchase ads because
Hmm.
no matter how many times my ticket has been escalated, they can't figure it out. And that's
Yeah.
okay because I'm also not going to give up my social media handle. I just won't, I will not let them win. And so what I found though was in talking with other artists, the question was brought up like, what would you do if social media went away? Like we saw that the very real thing that almost happened with TikTok, right?
Right.
Like if you lose your voice to people from something that someone else controls, what would you do? Well, for a lot of people, it was like absolute fear and terror, right? Like if my
Yeah.
TikTok with my million followers goes away, which I do not have a million followers on TikTok, I think I have 12. It's not my favorite platform, but if your million follower platform went away, what would you do? And so I love that with email marketing, those people have given you permission to spam them as much as you want. And if you spam them too much, they'll unsubscribe, but that's all
Right.
on them. So, like, these are people who are invested in you and invested in your work and your business that they want to know what's going on. And if you are not using it, then what are you doing with that? Like,
Right.
it's this perfect opportunity to get to talk to the people who actively want to see you grow and be successful. And so that over the last 3 years has been like our focus has leaned more to growing that list and helping people keep up with us in that way. Do I still use Instagram every day? Absolutely. But I also sleep better at night knowing that like if I wake up tomorrow and all my social media platforms are gone, it's going to suck, but it's not the end of the world because I still have a direct access to all of the people that I have on my email list.
Yeah, I'm such a believer in email lists. I feel like you probably know that I talk about it all the time, but I'd love to just kind of for a minute get like nitty gritty in because I know artists are wondering how are you growing it and what are you actually sharing? I think so many artists are like, great, you keep saying email, but like, what do I do with it? So I'd love
Yeah.
your
So,
experience.
so like with my email, like the things that I love is that like, okay, my main outreaches with people are Instagram and my email,
Hmm.
probably, if I'm really being honest. Facebook gets some like love, but only whenever Instagram gives it to it. Like I don't even put a lot of effort and time into
Yeah.
Facebook. So Instagram and email are like my two go-tos. And so Instagram is great because I get a lot of behind the scenes, right? Like you want to see a collection I'm going to come out with in 2 months, follow my Instagram because I'm going to show you everything from the sketches to the process of doing it all the way through. And what we found is there's a lot of people that are on my email list that don't have social media. And so we're replicating some of the content from my Instagram to my emails.
Hmm.
And that can be in the form of if I do like a series on Instagram that did really well, I might do a blog post about it and then put the blog post back on my website, which then gives me SEO, which gives me more like hits on Google. And then we link back to that in my email. So the whole point, like with my email, is trying to give people things that they can't just get elsewhere.
Yep.
And so because of the way that like with my work being on hometown, we have a lot of national followers, right? And so like the people that live in Mississippi can drive down and come to my studio. A lady pulled on the door handle 3 minutes ago, right? Like I have the door locked to
I
not
was like,
interrupt.
do we need to let her
No, you're
in?
great. It's fine. And so, yes. So if you're, close by or visiting Laurel, come by the studio. If I'm not busy, the door is open every single day. But for people that like live in California that can't come to my studio, I want them to feel like that when they open my email, they're walking into my studio. They're finding out things that they may not be able to see before. I've done my work has been selling kind of quickly lately, which awesome.
We love.
But like I did a study release where like I do small paper pieces that are not worth my time to go through a gallery. I did a whole study release just through my email. I guess that was back in April. And so because they were on my email list, there were 20 pieces that they were I never mentioned it on Instagram. I never, it just was, it went out to my email subscribers and they got first pick. And then they got to have pieces that might have gone faster if I put them on Instagram. And then sometimes I do the same thing on Instagram. I might release them only on my Insta stories. And then they feel like there's a benefit to following me. And I'm not going to be the one that's like I'm probably not going to teach you a class. Like you don't have to subscribe to my Instagram so that I can teach you a class. Like that's probably not going to ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find the things that fit my business model. So
Yeah.
like tile. I have a new line of tile that's coming out this week or next week somewhere. It's very soon. And so like the first place that I will talk about it will be on my email newsletter. So I know those people are really excited about this new line of tile that I have coming out. So they're the ones that get to hear about it first. And then I'll talk about it on social media and then we'll,
Mm-hmm.
go from there. But it's important to me that like the only real value that I can give people is that they get first dibs, right? They
Yeah.
get early access. And so that's sort of what I share on my emails. And it's, like at this point, so many product lines. If I want to try out a new t-shirt, I'm going to send it to my email. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to let them be the ones that are like, hey, what do you think about this? And then I'll judge on how that product does based on sales from the people who love my work. And so it is. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I just think people uh, worry about being salesy, worry about what to say, but I think it's just that it's giving them a benefit for subscribing, for following, and that benefit often is like early access, extended access, learning more, all that kind of stuff.
And also just be authentic.
People
Man,
love that.
that goes so far. Like, I know
Hmm.
it's really cheesy, but like we use Flowdesk for our emails, and like you can do the like where it'd be like, hey Haley, how are
Yeah.
you today? Like,
Yeah.
but like and it'll do it automatically based on whatever you have them saved as in your email list. But
Right.
like to me, like that's super great. Like
Hmm.
when you open an email from me, the last thing I want you to feel like is that it's like a catalog, right? Like
Right.
you wanted a catalog, like you could find that somewhere else. Like I want it to be like, hey, guess what I've been doing in my studio this week? Or guess who came by and visited me this week in my studio? Like there's so many cool opportunities like that. People just want like storytelling. Yeah, we could do a whole nother podcast on this, but like people want to know your story. Like
Yeah,
as an artist, you are one of the coolest people most people know.
exactly.
Successful or not, they don't care. Doesn't matter. The
Hmm.
fact that you are brave enough and bold enough to do a creative work and put yourself out there, you're the coolest person 90% of your friends know.
Hmm.
Okay? Hands down. And so, because of that, I want to know more about you. And if you
Hmm.
can tell me more about you, like we even do like, what are my favorite things to do in Laurel, Mississippi? Because people think that's interesting. I think it's totally boring. Congratulations. I go to Wilson's Commissary 3 times a week for lunch because I can't make up my mind and I don't want to go anywhere else. Like, I am a boring creature of habit and people find it fascinating. And like, but they want to know about you. And then when they buy a piece of your work or your prints or whatever product it is, they're going to tell the stories that they know about you because that's how people feel connected about you. And so, like, there's all kinds of books and podcasts, classes about storytelling marketing and using story in your, like, yes, there should be books and podcasts and all kinds of things about that because that's the job. Like, we we have to tell our story visually through artwork, but also people want to know about you so that they can talk about you when they show people your work because they're proud of it. And like, that's a weird thing to wrap your head around, but man, like, it is so powerful to be able to know enough about someone. Like, the number of people that know about my children is a little bit terrifying. Like, these little hometown ladies who I love ask me how my kids are. Like, Or like they'll mention it, and like I try not to like overly spam my personal Instagram account with my kids because I know like I want to keep their privacy as much as possible. But like they were on an episode a couple of weeks ago. So like it's they're out
Right.
there. And so, but like I have these little ladies that'll come up and be like, well, how was cheer camp? Like, how did you know that? But they love that they know about my girls and that like they feel that connection to them of like you would love this artist because he has three little girls that are just the cutest thing you
Well,
have
and
ever seen.
that's the thing. It's the people love you for the no like the normal stuff about you. The fact that you have three girls and like I feel the same way. It's like the stuff that gets the most engagement is when I'm like walking my dog and like am
Oh, for
sweaty
sure.
and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, she walks her dog." Like we walk our
My
dog. It's
kids
like
laugh at me
it
all the
just
time because I'm like, dang it. I was like, that picture of y'all walking to school just got 3 times more likes than my picture of my painting I did last week.
literally, but it tells the story and I think it's that connection that makes people feel like they know you and when people feel like they know you, they want to talk about you, they want to support you, they want to like all the other stuff happens and I think that's the part you figured it out but a lot of artists haven't. They're like, "Oh, but I'm not that interesting or I'm not like an influencer." I'm like, "You don't have
I'm
to
like the
be."
most boring person on the
People want
planet.
like they just like they think it's cool that you're a creative like that in of itself like baseline you're cooler than like them in their mind but then two they also want to connect with you so for them to connect with you you need to be normal
Oh,
like
absolutely.
I don't know it's kind of as simple as that and that is like that is marketing we solved the problem.
We saw, congratulations. Put a paywall up quick.
Well, this has been great. I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I kind of want to round us out with just like an
Yeah.
overarching lesson, tip, something that you can pass on to other artists that's just really benefited you in your career.
I think probably, I mean, really the biggest is like finding my authentic voice, finding the work that I produce makes me happy and makes me feel joyful, also makes other people happy and makes them feel joyful as well.
Hmm.
And like really leaning in and doing the work to figure out what that was and finding that authentic voice has been a game changer in my career because the I want to come to work every day,
Right.
right? Like I don't I don't struggle with like burnout as much as I did. I still will get burnout, don't get me wrong. But like I find myself wanting to sketch when I have good ideas or wanting to pursue the thing. And so I think that's really important is like finding that genuine voice that you're so like happy and joyful with and then letting your work show that. Like I think those are the big things. And then being authentic with how you market and how you show the work. I think that's people want to see authenticity, especially today in the AI crazy world that we live in. Like it's the thing that makes me feel like we are like AI is not going to take my job because
Yeah.
I know that the work that I'm doing is authentic and I am not just replicating something over and over again like a computer could do. I am putting my voice and my fingerprint and my touch to that. And through that authenticity, I feel like that's something that no matter how good it gets, it won't ever be able to touch that.
Yeah. I think that's just you said it so well and I think that's so true and I think that's something that's on a lot of people's mind too but it's like that we are artists like we want to show our unique I mean I think we all want authentic brands across the board like that's I think everyone is talking about it but I think specifically as artists our work is so reflective of who we are and so we need to share that story and open up and it really does make a huge difference so I think that's a great place to kind of wrap us up but I'm like do we want to do another podcast because I have like 80 more things I could talk to you about.
Come on.
Well, for today, can you share how people can learn more about you, buy your work, shop your work, your social media handles, all that stuff?
Yeah, so adamtrest.com is sort of the best launching spot. It takes you everywhere that my products are sold.
Hmm.
And then at Adam Trest is my Instagram handle.
Thank you so much for your time today.